Hello everybody, and welcome to this exercise here. We're going to be going over the wind turbine experiments 1, 2, and 3. So here I am inside of my project, just like everyone should have their own project here. This is the danger zone scene. So the first portion of the experiment is all about learning how to construct a complex object out of multiple simpler primitive objects inside of Unity, and starting to understand the whole concept of pivoting or parenting objects to one another, which will allow us to move and pivot objects from that parent. So I'm just going to be walking through the turbine experiment PDFs that are on Perforce. I'm going through every step, just making sure that it is all very well laid out and clear to everybody. So the first thing we want to be doing is creating a new scene. So go File, New Scene, and let's save it as something, whatever you want it to be. I'm going to call mine Wind Turbine Experiments. All right, let's go ahead and save that. All right, and then the first thing we need to do is we need to create the pivot object for our blades. So let's go ahead and create a sphere. So 3D object sphere, and then let's name that pivot. Okay. And the next thing we want to do is create a capsule. These are going to be our blades. So 3D object and a capsule. So in the instructions it says to make sure the objects are at 0, 0, 0. So let's go ahead and make sure both of our objects, our pivot and our capsule, are set to 0, 0, 0. Okay, and now in the scene window, if we hit F while one of our objects is selected, it will zoom in and show us where that object is. So now that's the case. We have our pivot sphere and our blade. That's a capsule. Let's go ahead and call that blade. All right, and we want to set the values of the scale for our capsule to be 3 in the Y and 0.25 in the Z. So now it's more resembling a blade, so it's thinner, it's a little bit longer. And now what we want to go ahead and do is drag our blade into our pivot object. So over here in the hierarchy, just select the blade and just drag and drop it inside the pivot. You'll notice this little arrow forms next to it so we can hide and show the children of the object, but now the pivot is the parent to the blade. Or another way to say it is the blade is a child of the pivot. So now this means when we move our pivot object around, the blade is going to go with it. So from here, we want to duplicate our blade 2 more times. So we have 3 total for our wind turbine. So the shortcut for that is just Control D while you're selecting your blade. So now there's 3 of them there. And now the instructions say that we want to rotate each blade 60 degrees. So go ahead and rotate one in the positive 60 and one negative 60. Okay, and now from here, we want to move our blades into position to make it look a lot more resemblance of a wind turbine. So make sure that we go up here. This button here will toggle between a global and local transformation widget. So you'll notice here when it's set to global, Y is pointing up and X is pointing to the right. It's very congruent with the axes in the world. But once we hit local, now you'll notice that you'll see that Y-axis shift. Now it's pointing the up direction for this actual game object. So it's going to allow us to very easily move this into place how we want to. So go ahead and do the same thing for, actually I'm just going to move this one the other way. So go ahead and do that for all 3 of your wind turbines, or all 3 of your fan blades. Move them into place, all right. So now we have what's more resembling a wind turbine. It should match the images in the PDF into this point. And one way to test this, now you can select your pivot object and press E to rotate. Now when you rotate, you should see the fan blades spinning around all at once, all in congruent manner when just selecting this pivot object. All right. So from here, let's go ahead and make the head and the stalk, the 2 objects that the fan blades are going to be, the turbines are going to be attached to. So for this, let's do something different. And so instead of using the 3D objects, let's just go ahead and make some with the level blocking meshes. Either's fine, but let's just get some practice using both. All right, so let's go ahead and move this into position. Let's put this at 0, 0, 0 in the transform. All right, and just move this out just a little bit. So select that pink dot there. That's going to allow you to move the level blocking tool and make it a bit larger. You can also scale it, but using the pink widget is just another way to transform. So just get practice doing so now. All right, and then let's also go ahead and create a cylinder. Actually, it's just just moving this into place. All right, so now let's make a cylinder. Now you can scale this however large we want, but I'm just going to go ahead and make mine 20 units tall. All right, now move it down. Okay, now it's important that we name these objects properly. We don't want to have random cubes and cylinders all throughout our level. So we're going to name the block on top. This is the head. And then below that, this long pole, this is our stalk. All right, and now we want to drag our head object into the stalk. So the stalk is the parent. All right, so now we have the fan, the turbine itself, and then the stalk, what it's attached to. Now from here, we want to combine them into one total object. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an empty game object. All right, so the very first option up at the top is create empty. And now what's very important to note and remember is before we add any other objects into this, we want to make sure that the position is at 0, 0, 0. Okay, and once you do so, once everything's all zeroed out, you'll notice it's right at the origin. Select your pivot and your stalk, so you can control select both of them and drag them into your game object. All right, and let's call this game object our wind turbine. All right, so you'll notice that the pivot for our wind turbine is still right at the origin after still at 0, 0, 0 after we've added those objects in. So now we are free to move these into position where we want them. So selecting them, and move them in place. All right, that looks good. So after you'll notice that when you move the children inside of the parent itself is still in the same location. So now we have our pivot down towards the bottom. Okay, and now to test and make sure everything's working, let's go ahead and rotate the pivot object and just make sure that nothing else moves. So we don't want our stalk to be moving, but we want to make sure all the fan blades are moving with it. All right, so that will complete the first activity. Now you have a good understanding of parenting objects to one another and the steps you need to take in doing so. So up next, we're going to be adding some animation to this. Quick. All right, so we're on to experiment 2 now. So that was completing experiment 1. It's really important that we start to understand how to animate objects in Unity and how to use the mechanim system along with the game objects. So if you would like to, at this point, you can get the latest version from the experiment package. So you'll notice on Perforce, we have experiment 2 Unity package. You can go ahead and grab this and either compare your work to what this package has or work from it. I'm just going to continue working forward with what I've been working on so far. All right, so what are the two basic states for the wind turbine? Right, so we're going to have it when it's off or when it's just idling, and then when it's on or active and the fan blades are going to be rotating. So for this, we need to actually create these states. So we want to go to the animation window. So window, animation. All right. So you'll notice that when we have an object selected, it's changing what object it is that we're animating. So what is the object that we want to animate? It's the pivot. So select the pivot object if you didn't already, and you'll see that that name changes. So to begin animating the pivot, we need to create an animator or an animation clip. So let's go ahead and create that. We're going to name this clip idle. All right, and now you'll notice that there is an empty animation in our timeline. All right, so here you can properly add whatever it is you want to rotate, or whatever it is you want to animate. If it's the transform, if it's the scaling of an object, if it's the rotation, whatever it is that you want to adjust, this is where you'll do it. So we're going to go ahead and add a property, and we want to animate the rotation of it. So here you'll notice these little pluses. This is how you add them, and you'll notice it populate in here. So now you'll see that Unity adds in 2 keyframes for us. That's what these blue diamonds are representative of, states in the animation, and then along the top this is time. So currently we have two default keyframes in there that we can adjust, but right now it's just default how we want it, and we don't really want to adjust anything for our idle because at this state we don't want anything moving. All right. Okay, and this is all right. So if we scrub through this timeline, so by clicking on this red arrow, you'll notice that nothing is changing. That's how we want it. All right. So from here, we want to create a second animation clip. So right here, you'll notice this is where all of your clips will be for whatever object it is you're animating. So we can create a new clip, and this one we're going to call it spinning. All right, and now just like before, we want to go ahead and add a property. So let's add in our rotation. All right, and now if we break that down further, we'll notice we have options for our rotation in each axis. So we want to be rotating our object only in the Z. We don't want to be having our fan blades come off in the X or the Y position. So we want to make sure that we're only animating in the Z. All right, so let's see if we want to have it at 0. Let's just double check and make sure everything is at 0, 0, 0 here. All right, nope, it's not. So we want to go ahead and change these. So everything is at 0. All right, perfect. I'll go back to our spinning animation. And now we want this to complete an entire cycle from start to finish. That way the animation will loop and we won't notice any popping or any clipping happening in the animation. So let's make this go one full revolution of 360 degrees. All right, so now when it goes around, you're going to notice it makes a complete spin cycle. And here we can test this out by pressing play and see what it's going to look like in real time. And by default, it's going to loop. So you're going to notice that you're not going to see the animation stop at any point. It's going to be continuously going. All right, so now we have our 2 animations. We have our idle and our spinning animation. Now that we have those, we need to connect them to each other to allow Unity to know when we want to have them transition from one state to the next. All right, so let's go back to our animator, or now we want to go to the animator window. So to do so, I'm going to just move my animation window off to another screen here in case we need it again, but we're going to go to Window. And first, let's make sure we select our pivot object, Window, Animator. So this is the same thing as the animation. If you didn't have your object selected, it should be okay. You just want to make sure that you select the object inside here to make sure you have all the proper states that we have made already. So you'll notice that inside here we have this idle and we have the spinning state already created. So every time you create a new animation state, a new animation clip, an animation state is created and it gets added into this window. All right, so we want to make sure that over here as well, you'll notice that this is the actual animation clip. So being dragged in here. So from here, we can actually create a new state if we'd like and then drop in animations, but we always want to make sure that the clip is associated with the actual animation state. All right, and now just like the instructions say, we want to make a transition between one state to the next. So we want to right click on idle, and here's this option for make transition. When you hit make transition, an arrow line is going to come up and start following your mouse, and now it's going to stay there until you select a new state for it to transition into. So let's go ahead and select our spinning state, and you'll notice that it snaps into place. And now click on the spinning. All right, and now, so this is saying that once we're in our idle state, we can transition to the spinning. But what if we want the player to also be able to go from, or to turn off the fan? So we want to make it go from spinning into idle, right? So let's go ahead and do the same thing in the other direction, right? So make transition, and we want it to transition back. All right, and now we need to add some conditions as to why the state would change and how it's going to be affected. So we need to have a parameter that we can toggle on and off between these states. So inside the parameter menu, inside this animator window, we need to click the small little plus icon right here. And let's go ahead and name this, yep. So yeah, we have our layers and our parameters. Sorry about that. So not the layers, let's delete this. So make sure you're still working in this base layer, the parameters tab, click this small plus, and we want to add a Boolean. All right, and now we want to call this toggle spin. Okay, so this is going to be an on and off state that will allow us to, when it's on, it's spinning, when it's off, it's in idle. That's what we're going for here. All right, so now that we have our parameter, we can set conditions for these transitions. So idle should only be spinning. Idle should only transition to spinning when toggle spin is set to true. All right, so now we can actually select these arrows, and here you'll see some conditions. So in here, we want to hit this small plus, and now we want to toggle between idle to spinning. See that the blue arrow is the one that's selected. We want this to be set to true. All right, and now for the opposite one, we want toggle spin to be set to false. All right, easy enough. All right, so now we can do a small little test to make sure this is working. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and go back to our scene, and let's go ahead and hit play. All right. Okay. Then if we open up the scene and have our animator window, let me drag over my animator. So you'll notice that right now it's looping in idle state, right? So let me see if I can show both of this at once. All right, there we go. So you notice that it's looping in idle state. Now if I click on toggle spin, it's going to transition into the spinning state. Now you can see my turbine is rotating. So if I can click it and turn it off, it's going to stop and stay in this idle state. So you can notice this blue bar here. This is it playing through the animation, and then when it gets to the end, it's going to start over. This is any looping animation you'll see will continually run through over and over again until a parameter or a condition is met. So this is how you know that you've gotten everything set up and working. So this is the completion of experiment 2, and now from here, the next step we want to add in experiment 3 is getting the animation to turn on and off, so to affect this parameter based on a player action. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this, pause the game. So same thing as before. From here, if you would like to grab the experiment 3 package, import that and work from here, feel free, but I'm just going to continue going forward. And always be sure to save your work every so often. Every 15-20 minutes, make sure you save your work, as well as be submitting this to Perforce. Right, so on to number 3. All right, so from here we're going to talk a little bit about triggers and how we can make sure the player is colliding with certain objects, how we want to make sure to affect parameters at certain times and have different events going on. Also, we'll be talking a little bit about getting some audio in place, as well as creating an interaction between a script and then a component-based system. So for this one, we may need to get this final package to have some audio, so I'm going to go ahead and just import that now. So import the package. All right, so we want Turbine Experiment 03. All right, so yeah, in here we have our two sound effects we want. So you will need this package for this setup. The other ones just include a scene with the completed work, but this final one includes some sound effects and some other things we may need. So you'll notice these are the animations that we had already created, and these two sound effects are new things that we want to be working on moving forward. All right, so let's go ahead and make a ground for the player to walk around on. All right, so I'm going to be using level blocking meshes just because I like them a lot more than the Unity primitives. All right, so let's just go ahead and scale this object, give the player a nice big ground to walk on. All right. Okay, and now we want to drop in a character for us to run around and play on this. All right, so we can do a search here in our project for ASCOR, and here it is. So the ASCOR character container. This is going to hold the character and the camera, everything we need to know. So we can just go ahead and drop this guy in here. You'll see him pop up inside of our hierarchy here. So let's just go ahead and play real quick, give it a test. And that's not good. All right, so good thing that I saved. All right, so alrighty, so, so something may be going on with the character controller. So let me open up my other scene here, just double test. That's fine. Something may be going on with the character controller. So what I'm going to do here quickly is just drag and drop my character container into my prefab folder. Just real quick, I just want to test this guy out, see if something's broken. No, that seems to be fine. So let me just go back into the scene. I'm going to go ahead and save this just in case it crashes again, but let's go ahead and try and drop in our character controller again. Okay, so not too sure why I got a little crash there, but that's definitely a good reason there to always save your work, because you don't know when something like that could happen. So luckily I didn't lose too much there, and it could have just been something on my end, because drag this in again and it seems to be working just fine. So sorry about that minor little hiccup there. Moving forward though, so now we have a a ground for our player to walk on, and we have the character um, inside there. So definitely make sure you test at this point, save and test, just to make sure your character is working properly. And now we need to create a trigger, something for the player to interact with. So I'm just going to do something quick, and this is a good rule and lesson for game design, is we don't want to be spending hours and hours making our little console look awesome and, you know, feel like an actual computer console. For the purpose of this exercise and just for game design prototyping, we don't care about the visuals that much. We really just want to make sure the functionality is working, because there's time in the end to make sure that all that's working. And there's artists and other people that are going to be a part of your team that are going to be more concerned with those elements. We really care about the functionality. So here's just a small little cube I make. You can make a capsule, really whatever you want, just some type of representation of where your console is, or where your your controller needs to be in order to activate that trigger volume. All right, and I'm going to just name this. I'm going to name this control station. It's always a good habit to name everything in your scene. Otherwise, you're going to end up, you're working and you're blocking out your level, or just working in Unity, and you have a lot of unnamed objects, and then you have this really long hierarchy, and you'll have things with like cube, sphere, cylinder, very basic and generic. If you create an empty game object, it's just going to be called game object. So it's a really good idea to start naming those and keep it organized. That way, if other people are working on this as well, everything is very clear and concise. So this floor, I'm just going to rename it just floor for now. All right, and now from here, we want to select our control station that we have here, and right click on it, and now we have the option to create empty. And now if we select an object and create an empty, rather than coming up to here to game object and create empty, this way it's going to be created as a child of this object. So you'll notice in the document we have a short little image. It should be created inside of this, so we want this game object to be an empty child of the control station. And now with this empty game object as a child, we want to rename it as control trigger. All right. And now from here, over in the inspector, we're able to add components to this game object. So in here, we could add all kinds of things. But right now we're going to be focusing on just a trigger volume, something that the player can walk into. So we're going to go ahead and create a sphere collider. Okay. And now we want to make sure that the is trigger is checked on. And now up here, we're able to edit this collider. So once we click on this button, you'll notice that the object changes, and we have these little points here. So now you're able to select these points and physically move this. So I can move them here. Nice. Grab these points and just drag it out. So I'm going to make mine a bit large, just to make sure the player is able to walk up to this, because for right now we don't have any messaging coming up on screen, so we don't know exactly when we're in the volume, but something large enough that we know when we're near this box, we're going to be close enough. All right, so now that's done. And so, yep, we just make sure that this is checked on is trigger, and that's all we need to do for that. So now we're going to move forward to the interaction of this game object and what we need to do to actually tell this object to turn on that boolean that we created for the fan. So from here we need to add another component to our control trigger. All right, so we're going to add a script. We want to make sure that it is a C# script. So you can search for new script. Now here it's going to give you the language, so make sure you're in C#. And just so making sure I'm sticking to the instructions, we want to name it Control Turbine. All right, now we want to hit down here, create and add. So now this adds a new component, and here it adds a script for us. So we can go ahead and double click on this. Alrighty, and now you'll notice in the instructions that we're walking you through creating the script and having you recreate this image to practice getting some experience scripting. Even though that we're just walking you through it, make sure you're reading through these comments and get a good understanding exactly of what's going on in here. All right, so I'm not going to go through and comment everything. I'm going to go ahead and explain it while I'm writing it out. So we need a public game object. All right, and then let's call this turbine pivot. All right, and now this is going to create a variable for us to be able to find that turbine pivot game object inside the scene, so we know exactly where to rotate from. And now also we need a private animator called pivot anim. This is going to be exactly what this is, just plugging in the animator that we created for that pivot. And now we're going to also create a private bool named isSpinning. So this is going to just check, is our object spinning or not? All right. Okay, so now in the start function, so this is when the game starts, when we hit play, what's going to happen. So in here, oh, sorry about that. I'm going to All right, so pivot anim, the bool or the private animator we just made up top. We're going to set that equal to turbine pivot dot. So when you hit dot, a list of different options are going to come up for you. So once you start typing, the list is going to get smaller. And once you find the one you want, so we want get component, you can just hit enter and it's going to fill it in for you. All right. So inside get component is a function. So if we use the carrots like there, it'll pop up. We can tell it exactly what we want to find. So in the turbine pivot, we want to find the animator. So this is finding a component. All right, so get component animator. All right, and now it's a function, so we need the braces and then just a semicolon. All right, so when the game starts, all this is doing is just putting pivot anim equal to the component of the turbine pivot, so it's that animator. All right. Okay, so now in the update function, so in the update function, this happens every single frame, or this happens, yeah, once per frame. So if your game's running at 60 frames a second, it's happening 60 times in 1 second. So in here, we want to set isSpinning equals the pivot anim dot get bool parentheses. Now this is going to be the name of the Boolean that we created inside of this animator. So we called it toggle spin. Okay, and I'm just going to I'm just going to double check and make sure that I named it exactly, because we have to make sure that we got to make sure that it's named exactly the same. So toggle spin, let me just go back to Unity here. Let's see, window, animator. Let me select my pivot first. Parameters, toggle spin with a lowercase t and capital S. All right, that looks good. Okay. And now we want to add another function to this. So this is inside our update. So outside of these braces, we want to check if a colliding object tagged as player enters this trigger. We want to be able to send a message to the console to let us know. So when the player's inside of the volume, we need to tell Unity that that's the case. So what we're going to do here is void on trigger enter. All right, so this is a function, so it needs parentheses. All right, so now inside of onTriggerEnter, we're looking for a collider entity. All right, and now because this is a function, we need curly braces as well. All right, so now inside of here, we're gonna write an if statement. So if that collider entity, so entity dot tag, if that entity has a tag set equal to player, we want to do something. So now this is only going to affect this next line of code is only going to matter if that entity is a player. So if another object enters, it's not going to happen. But if it's a player, we want to just have a short print to the console. So print. All right, and here you can write whatever you'd like, but I'm just going to write what the script says. So the player has entered the control trigger. Okay, and now close the parentheses. Close the parentheses and semicolon. Okay, so right now, if we go ahead and save this, as long as I don't have any errors, let me see, go ahead and save. And now come back to Unity. Looks like I don't have any. All right. So now I should have something come up on the console when I enter this volume. Okay. Looks like I'm getting an error. Object reference not sent to an instance of an object. Okay, so the turbine pivot is, we haven't plugged anything in there yet, so it's yelling at me because it wants to know what's going on in there. That's why we're getting that. And because it's in the update, it's going to be happening 60 times a second. So just so I can test this, I'm going to drop this turbine pivot in here. And I'm going to actually clear this. So you can clear on play if you have this selected. Your console is going to completely clear out anytime you hit the play button. Okay. Well, it's telling me I've got 2 audio listeners in the scene, and that's because I have this main camera. That's always a good rule of thumb. Always make sure you only have 1 audio listener, so delete that other one. But you'll notice that among there I do have that popping up, so let me just go ahead and play it one more time so I can see it just happen. Alright, so I leave the trigger, I enter, and it comes back. So my player start is a little close to my trigger volume, but you'll notice anytime I leave the trigger and come back, that comment is coming up. It's printing to the console. So just for testing's sake, I'm going to move my character away from the trigger volume. So I spawn in. You'll see my console's clear. I walk forward, and there's my print to the console. All right, so a little rocky there. Apologize about a few little mix-ups, but we're moving forward, making progress. All right, so back to Visual Studios. We're going to continue on. All right, so now we're checking and making sure the player has entered the trigger, but now we need to double check and make sure the player is staying in the trigger. All right, so this is going to be another function. Okay, so this is void on trigger stay. All right, so very similar, just on trigger enter, on trigger stay. And this is a function, so we need parentheses. And now on trigger stay, same thing before, collider entity. All right, and now we need curly braces. Okay, so now inside this function, similar as before, we want to do another if statement. So if, right, entity dot tag is set equal to player. So this is checking the player's tag, or checking the tag, see if it's player. So if this is set to player, we want to execute some command. So we're going to need another function, so we need curly braces. All right, enter, enter. So now what we're going to do is create another if statement in here. So now if the entity tag is set to player, execute this command. So now we want to do if input dot get key up. And now here we want to type in the key code, so parentheses. What key do we want to press? So key code E, keycode.E. So here we could type whatever we'd like. If we want it to be any number on the keyboard, any value on the keyboard we have access to here, but we're going to go with E as the standard interaction key. You know, for most games, E is the standard interact button. So now, so if the input is E, and so to add another condition to this, we can do double and. So if the key code is E, if the player presses E and is spinning is set equal to false, we want to execute another command, right? So we're starting to get a little bit more complex now, but we're nesting an if statement inside another. So you can just read this just like you're reading anything else from top to bottom. So if the player, so on trigger stay, so if the player is staying inside of this collider and it's tagged as player, so only objects tagged as player, look for this. So now if they're inside the collider and they press the E key and is spinning is set to false, so when is spinning is set to false, we know that our turbine is off. So when this happens, when it's off and the player is in the trigger and presses E, we want to change the Boolean, right? Because their Boolean is what's affecting the animation. So the pivot anim dot set bool, and now we want parentheses and our name of our bool, so toggle spin, and now comma true. All right, so what this is doing is taking this value and setting it equal to that one. So we're doing a little shortcut there too, because when you notice when you have this set bool function and you hover over it, it tells you exactly how to format it. So string name, comma, bool value. Okay. Okay, so from here, we're just going to do a short print so we know exactly what's happening. So print the player has activated the wind turbine. All right. So, I gotta make sure I have semicolons at the end of every line. Okay. All right, so from here, let's go ahead and test this just to make sure our work is functioning properly. We want to go ahead and save. So now what should happen? We should be able to walk into the volume, press E, and the value of the bool will change, as well as our animation should in turn start functioning. All right, so here we go, moment of truth. So walking up to the console, you'll see the player has entered the trigger. All right, I'm just going to look up, so when I press E, oh, alrighty, I'm getting an error, but it is functioning. Argument out of range exception. All right, so let me see what that's. Okay, that's giving me an issue with the gravity gun. All right, so that's an issue that we're not going to worry about for right now, but I'm definitely going to take a look at that and see what's going on. All right, but um, you saw the. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my animators too, so we can see it changing. You saw that turbine start to animate as I. Oh, it broke off here. Here we go. As I was interacting there, you saw that the wind turbine started to rotate. So let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger for everyone to see. Just want to be able to show you that toggle spin is actually being affected. All right, so there you'll notice that the toggle spin gets turned on and the turbine starts rotating. All right, so from here, all right, let's go back. I'm going to close my animator window, make that full screen. All right, and then let's go back to our script and continue on. So now we've got it rotating, right? But now we want to be able to turn off that wind turbine. Okay, so that sounds very similar to what we're already doing, right? So if you take a look at the script inside of the PDF, you'll notice that the difference between on and off is very, very minute, right? So what we're going to do, and you definitely save some work here, is copy all of this, and now we want to make sure we paste it in the right spot. So we want to have this this curly braces goes with this if statement, so we want to have that right here. So then down here we're going to paste what we just copied, right? So this is the same if statement, so always be working smarter, not harder. Don't want to retype all that out. And now we just want to change a few key things, right? So if the player presses E and is spinning is false, but it's currently set to true, so if it's set to true, we want to execute this command, right? So, but instead of setting toggle spin equal to true, we're going to set this equal to false, right? So we're turning off that Boolean. And now I'm just going to change this print statement so everyone can see the player has deactivated the wind turbine, okay? Alrighty, so that should be able to turn on and off the player's, turn on and off that wind turbine based on the player input. And now just one other thing that we're going to add in, and this is just a good habit to get into, not necessary, but just definitely a smart way to just double check everything is working as always. We always want to be telling the computer what we want. Don't let the computer itself think of something. We always want to give it every single command. So really we want to have another function on here for on trigger exit. So when the player leaves the volume, we're just going to have a print function, but this can be very, very useful for you if you start to think of when the player leaves a volume, we can tell the machine or tell Unity to do something. What is it that we want it to do? That's up to you as a designer. Maybe we want to have it play a sound, or we want to have it, tell the player something, have a particle effect go off. Really up to you, but the power of being able to tell the machine to do something is always important. So we want to tell them exactly when the player is leaving. So same thing as before, I'm actually just going to copy this. So grab that. So if the entity.tag is player, so if the player is leaving, we're just going to do a short print. So more curly braces. Print the player is leaving the volume. All right, and now we need quotes. All right. All right, so on trigger exit, if it's a player that's leaving, print the player is leaving the volume. All right, that all looks good to go. I don't see any issues there, so let's go ahead and save this. All right, let's go back to Unity and double check, see if we've, so I've got an error. It looks like I may have missed. See, so you can always just double click on your error and it's going to take you exactly to your problem. It looks like I'm missing a curly brace. Yep, I'm missing one curly brace. So here we go. Save it again. Oh, still missing another one. So you'll notice that you're going to be running into issues with this. I'm following along with the instructions. I'm still making a few minor mistakes. So it's always important that you are double checking your work and doing so often, because if you miss something, the more work you do, the easier it is to make a mistake once you just continue working. This one goes. Let's see. I think I'm missing another one. Yep. So this one needs one. I should have one. Need one more. Let's see. I'm just looking for my mistake real quick. I think I made something. Yep. I should have one. I think I put this whole this function inside of another, so this curly brace should actually be above here. There we go. So now this function goes here, this one goes here, and this one goes here. All right, that looks much better. There we go. All right, and my errors go away. So let's give this one final test. Before we do it, let's just go ahead and save our scene. All right, so now I'm in my scene. Enter the volume. Player presses E, starts rotating. All right, press E again. It stops. Perfect. Now I leave the volume, and it told me that I left. All right, so there we go. I've got everything functioning. Now the player is able to go in and out. And if you want to go ahead with my workflow, that's okay. I notice in the instructions it's telling you to add in that pivot object earlier on, but it's definitely a good habit to do scripting in small chunks rather than waiting a long time and trying to do a whole script, because you'll notice I made a few mistakes there. I didn't do everything perfectly. So if you're trying to fix the entire script, you may run into some problems. So I know the instructions say later on after you write the script to attach the turbine pivot to that script, but if you want to go ahead and do so earlier, that's going to allow you to do some of that testing. All right, so let's see, just moving forward, I think we are on to should be on to setting up the audio. And just so I can clarify, since everyone's here and watching through this, you'll notice when we were checking things for a tag of player, right? If you look at the ASCORE blockout character, his tag is player, right? So if you click on that, you can notice all these other tags, so you can be checking for any other thing as well. So if you want to set tags for physics objects or for a game controller, whatever it may be, you can use those tags to your advantage when you're scripting. All right, so once you're testing and you have everything working there, you should be able to walk up to your control panel, press E. You should see all those messages pop up. And if you want to go ahead and add those comments to your script, definitely do so, just so you have a good understanding of what each line is doing. It's a good habit to get into while you're still being introduced to scripting. All right, so now on to the audio setup portion of the of the assignment. All right, so we want to select the control trigger object and add an audio source component into the inspector. All right, so select this trigger, add component, add an audio source down here. All right, and now we want to uncheck the play on awake option. All right, so turn this off, because if this is on, it's going to play as soon as we press start. All right, now we want to add the click sound asset that we imported in from that package. All right, so in the audio clip, you can either drag and drop from your project, or you can also hit this small little circle here. So I can click on that circle, and it's going to show me every single audio clip in my project. Right, so I only have the two, so I'm going to go ahead and select click, and you'll notice it populates in there, so we can go ahead and close this. So now this control trigger has an audio source with that click, but we want to tell it when to play that sound. Right? So we want to go back into our script and make a few adjustments. So inside of our script, we need to, first we need to add a variable for this object. So inside up here, so let's go ahead and do it right below the bool we made. So we want to add private audio source. Oops. Control, let's go ahead and call this control audio. All right. So now on start, we want to set something equal to that that control audio, right? So same thing like we did in here, how we found that turbine, the component, we want to find the control audio equals get component, and we need the carets again. All right, so inside here we want to do the audio source, right? Because we're finding the audio source game component, or component of that game object. All right, and now we need parentheses because it's a function. All right, so now we're setting this control audio equal to the component of the game object, right? And since this script is on our trigger volume, and we have that source audio on the same trigger volume, we're good to go. All right, and now we want to add in, you'll notice that in the PDF that there's the red boxes around any of the changes we're making. I'm just going to explain why those are where they are. So inside the on trigger stay, once the player presses E, we want to have them, we want that sound effect to play. So right below the print, we're going to go ahead and add a line of just control audio dot play. Right, so we want to give the players, we want to start thinking about giving the players some feedback as to, when they press a button, play this sound effect. And now same thing too for when they press it again to turn it off. Control audio dot play. Alrighty, so that looks good. So let's go ahead and save it. So now I'm using headphones and a microphone, so you guys won't be able to hear the sounds, but I'm just gonna go ahead and test this and make sure everything's working. All right, so I walk up to it. All right, I heard the sound effect. Here, there it is. My turbine is spinning. Go ahead and turn it off. All right, and I heard the sound effect. Perfect. Alright, so that's working so far. And now we want to go ahead and do the same thing for the for that pivot object, right? So just making sure we hear the sound effect of the fan spinning. And real quick, I just thought of a solution to this for now, just because we're in this own contained scene. Let's see if we can just go ahead and remove the gravity gun. Oh, I'm just going to break the prefab. Let's actually not do that. I'm going to try and figure out what's causing that error and hopefully get a fix out to everybody before you work on this. But it seems that the error is contained to the gravity gun and something is going on with that. So we're definitely going to get that solved for everyone, so no fear about that. And it seems like it shouldn't be affecting your experiment here. So let's go back into the script, right? And now, just like we did before, we want to do the same thing for the fan spinning noise. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this line here, copying the audio source. All right, and now let's just change the name of this to be something different. So let's call it pivot audio. Okay. Oh. Okay, and now same thing in our start. We want to set that equal to something. So our pivot audio is equal to, now it's not this object that it's attached to, right? Because this script is attached to the trigger volume. So we don't want to find the component for this. We want to find the component for the turbine pivot. Right? All right, so that looks good there. It looks like I missed a step. Got ahead of myself. Before I do that, I need to go into Unity and actually add the audio source to this pivot, right? So add a component, audio source, and now same thing as before. Let's find our sound effect. Plug in the wind loop. Okay, so that needs to be done in order to find that game object or that component. Okay. All right, and now very similar when we're gonna have this sound effect play at the same time that our other one was, right? So we press the button, our fan is turning on, and then we're also gonna hear the sound of the fan blade spinning. So pivot audio. All right, and then I'm just gonna copy that and paste it down there, and when we turn it off. So, and now in this time, instead of having it play, right, when we turn off here we're having the player press a button, so we want to hear the sound effect of a button being pressed on the console, but here this is going to be playing until we want to turn it off. So when the player turns off the fan, the audio for the fan spinning should stop. All right, so let's go ahead and save that script. All right, and then also come back to Unity and let's clear all our errors and save the scene, just in case anything goes wrong. Always be saving. And now go ahead and hit play. Oh, so I'm hearing, oh, I know what I did wrong, because I was going to say I'm hearing the sound effect, and that's not right. What I remember I didn't do, which definitely should have been more conscious of all the instructions, was I didn't turn this audio source play on awake. So this is causing me to hear it right away. Want to have that off. So let's just save this again. Just make sure we save that change. All right, I spawn in the level. I don't see anything happening, no errors. Don't hear the sound effects. Walk up to the console, press E. All right, there we go. I hear the sound effects going. Press it again, the fan blade turns off. All right, there we go. So there we go. That is all 3 of the experiments completed. Like I said, I'm definitely going to take a look at this error and see exactly what's going on. And if you're having issues, we can work with any other character controller. I just wanted you guys to use the one that you'll be using when you're prototyping. But this is the completed experiment. Now with all this information, you should be able to go into Perforce and work on this entryway assignment. Oh, that's the package. Sorry about that. Right here, this turbine competency assignment. So once you have worked through all of those experiments with the turbine, now you have all of the understanding you need to make an entryway. It uses all the same principles, parenting objects, setting up a bool to interact with the different states, as well as just creating a volume and having the player interact with it. So we're not telling you exactly every single step and how to create this doorway, this entryway, but you have learned it all by doing these experiments. So if you have any questions at all, definitely reach out to me and we can work through it. And then also feel free to add all of your work that you've just worked on onto Perforce. So one way to do this is I have my own project down here, and that's what I've been working in. So I'm going to come over to Unity and just save my whole project, make sure anything I've made changes to is saved. Okay, and now I can come back to my assets folder in here and right click and reconcile offline work. Right, this is going to check my computer for any changes that I've made to the assets folder specifically and find out any changes and add those into a change list for me. So in theory, it should find the new assets that I've added in, because I added in the source audio, the audio source files. I've added in a new scene. I added in a new script. I made changes to that scene, so it should look for all that stuff inside here, and then you can go ahead and add that to the server. Alrighty, so if you have any other questions, definitely get a hold of me or anyone that's involved with the class, either Mr. Gazway or myself. We'll definitely be here to help you and walk you through this. Definitely the Unity Lab as well. We'll all be able to work through it, but make sure you read the instructions and reread them. It's a good habit to read them before you start the assignment, just so you have a really good understanding. All right. So here it is, the reconcile finally finished, and it's found all these files that I've been working on. So these are all new files, right? So it's marking these for add. So I'm going to go ahead and hit reconcile. Okay, now it added those files into a change list right here. So now I can just go ahead and submit. All right, so this is going to add all these new files. This is going to add all these new files to your project. And this isn't part of the assignment, but you might as well get practice in adding your work to the server. Alrighty, and let's just go ahead and submit that. So now that was working through all the experiments, so I hope you enjoyed that, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions.